Let's move on now to Israel, though, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that his country is just getting started against the Houthis in Yemen after a bombardment of airstrikes killed at least 6 people. The United Nations has called for restraint, warning the attacks pose grave risks to its humanitarian operations in the country. The head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, was caught up in the strikes, which happened meters away from a flight he was boarding at the airport in the capital Sanaa. There were also explosions in the Red Sea port of Hodeidah. Shaima Khalil reports from Jerusalem.
Panic and fear in Sanaa airport. People rushing to leave the building after an Israeli airstrike. The IDF said they hit Houthi military targets there. The port city of Hodeidah was also hit. Houthi officials said the strikes were barbaric, a crime against the Yemeni people. The Israeli military said it struck targets used by the Houthis to smuggle Iranian weapons into the region. This is the second Israeli airstrike on the Houthis in Yemen in less than a week. The Houthis, an Iran-backed armed group which controls northwestern Yemen, began their attacks shortly after the start of the Gaza war in October last year, initially targeting international shipping, acting, they say, in solidarity with the Palestinians. On Saturday, a missile launched from Yemen injured more than a dozen people in Tel Aviv when it landed in a public park. Israel warned it would respond with force.
We will continue to cut off the terror arm of the Iranian axis of evil until we complete the job.
The Houthis have vowed to keep up their attacks until the end of the war in Gaza. But the war in Gaza continues, as does the wider regional conflict that it sparked.
A short time ago, I spoke to our correspondent in Jerusalem, Emir Nada. He told me more about the escalation between Israel and the Houthis in Yemen.
Just over the past week, we've seen this real escalation in the number of missiles fired by the Houthi rebels in Yemen towards Israel, and indeed Israel's response. The strikes that we saw yesterday by the Israeli Air Force on various sites in Yemen, including its main international airport in the capital Sanaa, on ports on the Red Sea and on energy infrastructure, has led to the death of around 6 people. It is being reported. The Secretary General of the United Nations is calling for restraint. He said that the strikes on public infrastructure are especially alarming because Yemen is obviously a country which has been suffering for many years, and is over 80% of the population there are dependent on aid. But for the Israeli military and political establishment, they're seeing this now as a real central element of a central focus of their calculations, their war campaigns. Caught with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that they intend to go after the leaders of the Houthi rebels, and that their campaign is just getting started. Now, the Houthi rebels there in Yemen, some 1,200 miles from where I'm standing, launched their campaign in what they say is out of solidarity with the Palestinian people in Gaza, sending hundreds of missiles and rockets towards Israel over the past year. It's led to also US and UK militaries, air forces being involved in the coalition striking Houthi targets in Yemen. But as we've heard from the Prime Minister here in Israel, it looks like this campaign is just getting started on the Israeli side, and it shows you just how much the war in Gaza is still continuing to reverberate around the region.
And as you mentioned there, the war in Gaza is still continuing, and there had been a blip of confidence that perhaps we were moving towards a ceasefire. That seems to have died down a bit. How much will this latest kind of element of the Houthi side of the conflict affect any prospects of a ceasefire for Gaza?
It's hard to say exactly how much the Yemen element will impact the ceasefire negotiations. The signals that we've had out of the ceasefire negotiations focus more around the technicalities, around Hamas accusing the Israeli side of setting new conditions, with the Israeli side, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accusing Hamas, their side, of walking back withdrawing from negotiations and sort of understandings that had already been reached in negotiations. Meanwhile, we've had the negotiating team telling Israeli press anonymously, some members of that team telling Israeli press that they think Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been undermining the talks by public statements he's been giving in media. So yes, there has been a shift in the tone. The positive signals we heard just over a week ago about the progress of the talks seems to be slowing down. And right now the worry is just whether they'll be able to reach a deal, to strike a deal before the inauguration of President Trump at the end of January.
Dr. Ali Mamouri, a research fellow at Deakin University who previously served as strategic communication advisor to the Iraqi Prime Minister, gave me his reaction to the Israeli strike in Yemen.
It was expected. It's a part of Netanyahu military campaign against Iran, a proxy in the region, after the large defeat against Hamas and Hezbollah that made them incapable of doing or running any kind of operation against Israel. And after fall of Assad, now it's Yemen's turn. Probably after that, Netanyahu will go to Iraqi militias and eventually to Iran. In terms of Yemen, the big difference between this operation and Saudi Arabia-led operation previously is that Israel is not intending to change the government or do any kind of a grand operation. Israeli goal is very clear and limited. First of all, to eliminate the leaders of Houthis, so make the organization not able and capable to continue the operation against Israel, destruct all the missile capabilities and other military capabilities, so Houthis cannot shoot more missiles to Israel. And third of all, push them back from Hadideh to make them unable to make any threat to the ships in the Red Sea. It seems to me that Israel is capable of doing that, and this is the goal for Yemen, not more.